Friends, today we are going to learn about Prevention of Corruption Act 1988. This is the act which is extensively used by CBI and other anti-corruption agencies for taking action against the corruption in India. So, this act was passed in 1988 by the Parliament to combat corruption in the government agencies as well as in the public sector undertakings. This is the act which is also used by the state governments for taking action against their own officials. So what are the causes, what are the offences which are prescribed under PCA or Prevention of Corruption Act, for which an officer or any other person can be punished? So the first is taking gratification other than legal remuneration in respect of an official act. It means that if a government officer is taking any money from anybody other than what is officially permitted, what is his salary and income, that is an act of corruption. Now, gratification is a word which is having a wider connotation. One meaning of it is obviously that you take money from somebody. But other than that, it also means that you are taking something in kind. For example, if you are taking hospitality, vehicle, accommodation, or any other facility from somebody, that is also covered under gratification. It also includes other things like sexual gratification from somebody. That is also covered under the gratification. So gratification basically means any types of benefit which you are drawing from anybody which is illegal and which is beyond the income which the government is officially giving to you. The second is the gratification in order to influence public servant by corrupt or illegal means. So if somebody is taking money to even influence the public officers, that is also an act of corruption. Now suppose I am a senior officer, I don't have to do anything illegal because the work will be done by my subordinate or my friend or somebody else. In that case, I take the money and then that person does the work because I have certain influence on that person. That is also an act of corruption. The next is taking gratification for exercise of personal influence with the public servant. So if you know some public servant and that person can do something for somebody and you have collected some money so that you can use the influence and get the work done, that is also corruption. Offering bribe to a public servant. If anybody is offering bribe to a public servant, that is also an act of corruption. The most important thing to be noticed here is that offering itself is an act of corruption. Whether you actually give that bribe or not is immaterial. So if you just make an offer that I will give you so much of money if you do my job, that itself is an act of corruption. Whether you have actually paid that money or not is immaterial. Next is the abatement by public servant of offences. So if you are working with a public servant and committing some illegal act, that is also an act of corruption. Obtaining valuable things without consideration or inadequate consideration is also corruption. So if you are a tax officer, for example, or a collector, and there is a company who is selling something, say at 1 lakh rupees, you ask that person to give you something free, or you ask him to give something on very highly discounted price at 50,000, let us say. So you have not paid the adequate consideration or you have got it free, that is also an act of corruption. Then finally, criminal misconduct by a public servant, including acquiring property disproportionate to the known source of income. So if you are acquiring property which is disproportionate to the known source of income, that is also an act of corruption. And a criminal misconduct is also an act of corruption, and we have to learn about the criminal misconduct in little wider extent, because this is something which needs your focus, because this has been a wider connotation. So the original statute actually defined criminal misconduct as an act of public servant extending illegal pecuniary advantage to any person by abusing his official position. In this provision, there was no stipulation that the officer concerned should have drawn any undue advantage. See, normally in corruption, gratification is must. That means you must have got some benefit from somebody which is illegal. But in many cases, what happens that this is not required. For example, if you are a tax officer and you grant a tax benefit, let us say a refund of 1 crore rupees to somebody, and that refund was subsequently at the appeal level or a high court level, let us say, is found to be wrong. In that situation, what happens that it can be alleged that because of your decision, there is so much of loss to the government exchequer, and therefore it is a criminal misconduct and you can be charge sheeted for corruption. Even though you may not have taken any decision in consideration or for consideration, you have not got any money. That the CBI is not even required to prove. In the same way, suppose you are a banker, you have given a loan and the company got bankrupt and you did not get any money back. The bank lost that money. Again, you can be charged for criminal misconduct if there is any lacuna in sanction of the refund, even though it was within your discretionary power. So what happened that because of such provision, where benefit is not required, gratification is not required to be proven, just because there is some loss to the government, then you can be charged for corruption. It has created a lot of fear in the mind of the government officers. They were not taking decisions, because any decision which you take may result into loss to the government. There is a possibility. So in the tax department, what happened that suppose a refund file is come to you, you reject the refund. In that situation, there can be no charge that because of your decision there is any loss. But if you give the refund, then there is a possibility whether it is legal or illegal, that will be decided at the higher level. And if it is decided legal, you will get no reward. But if it is decided illegal, let us say by high court or other forum, then you can be charge sheeted for criminal misconduct. So this is the problem which this Prevention of Corruption Act created in the past. So government has made certain amendment in July 2018, that is only last month, where certain definitions for criminal misconduct were changed and also some important provisions were amended. Let us understand the important changes which has been made in Prevention of Corruption Act recently. First of all, it has been prescribed that all the investigating agencies will have to get prior permission, rather sanction, of the appropriate authority in government to probe officers, including the retired one. So, CBI earlier were able to investigate case against anybody, but now they need permission. Now please remember that in the case of red-handed case, means somebody who is taking bribe and he was caught red-handed, in such situation there was never a need for taking any permission in the earlier regime also, in the present regime also. But if suppose somebody has taken a decision and that decision is supposed to be irregular, in that situation if the CBI feel that it can be a case of corruption, then they have to need permission. Otherwise, in case of direct bribery, no permission is required. Criminal misconduct will now cover only the misappropriation of property and possession of assets disproportionate to income. So if you have possessing disproportionate asset, then obviously it will continue to be an act of corruption. But otherwise, only when there is a exchange of money is involved, misappropriation of property is involved, then only it will be case of criminal misconduct. In the change of law, there has been a severe punishment prescribed for the bribe giver also. So the bribe giver is also to be punished, and his maximum term has been extended from 3 years to 7 years. However, if suppose a bribe giver has been forced to give any bribe, in that situation he has 7 days, and within 7 days he can report to the appropriate agency, and then he will get immunity. But if he fails to report that matter to the appropriate authority, then he will also be punished along with the officer who has taken bribe. Another very important change which has been brought in the Prevention of Corruption Act now is to fix the responsibility of the commercial organizations. Because in our country, you must have heard this crony capitalism. Many corporate houses are flourishing by giving bribe to the government officers. And they were earlier not being punished because specific provisions were not there. Now, the responsibility of the commercial organization is also fixed in the recent Prevention of Corruption Act. So, these changes in the law include the commercial organization into the ambit of corruption. And commercial organization is defined as following. A commercial organization shall be guilty of an offence and shall be punishable with a fine if any person associated with the commercial organization gives or promises to give any undue advantage to the public servant. Obviously, commercial organizations are legal entities, you can't jail them, but you can impose fine and penalty on them if suppose they are found engaged in any of the corruption activity. Another very important change which has been brought in this amendment was that it has been specifically provided that a special judge shall ensure the completion of a trial within a period of 2 years from the date of filing of the case. This is also a very welcome provision, and it has also provided that the case has to be closed within 4 years. So I think this is a very welcome provision because earlier the corruption cases used to take several decades. They used to take not only years but several decades, and that was not something which was proper because justice delayed is also equal to justice denied. And so now the government has said that within 2 years we will decide, and the maximum period will be 4 years. And if that is really implemented on the ground, I think that will be really a very important change and a very welcome change. So friends, today we have learned about the salient provisions of Prevention of Corruption Act. We have understood what is Prevention of Corruption Act, what are the different type of offences under this, and what are the recent changes which have been brought under this act. Thank you very much for watching the video. Friends, we have earlier learned about the Prevention of Corruption Act. Now in Prevention of Corruption Act, government has made certain amendments in 2018, and these amendments have a wide-ranging impact as far as the investigation against corruption is concerned. So today we are going to learn about the amendments in the Prevention of Corruption Act which was brought by the government in 2018. So by an amendment, the Prevention of Corruption Act 1988 was amended. The Prevention of Corruption Act was amended in 2018 and the amendments were brought into effect from 26th of July 2018. Now the salient changes which has been done in the Prevention of Corruption Act we shall discuss now. So the first important change is in respect of the definition of undue advantage which has been enlarged now after the amendment. The amendment provides that any public servant who accepts or attempt to accept from any person any undue advantage either for himself or for any other person in lieu of performance of a public duty shall be punishable with imprisonment for a minimum term of 3 years and maximum term of 7 years. Now this amendment has defined undue advantage to mean any gratification other than legal remuneration. That means if you are taking any benefit for doing an official act, then that will be considered to be an undue advantage. For example, if you are using your position and favoring somebody, but you are not taking any money, earlier it was not easy to classify that as an act of corruption. But today, suppose you are doing something for the purpose of getting a better posting or post-retirement benefit or gift or the favors which are not estimable in the terms of money, but that will also be covered under the ambit of undue advantage. So suppose you use your position and do a favor to a politician and use that politician to get good posting. Now that will also be covered under the corruption. So this way the definition of undue advantage has been enlarged, and this is a very important change in the Prevention of Corruption Act. Another very important change which has been brought in the Prevention of Corruption Act is that there is a stricter provision now for the bribe giver. Earlier, if you are giving the bribe, you were taken rather lightly. But now, the bribe giver is to be punished as strictly as the bribe taker, that is the government officer. So, according to the new provision, if any person pays bribe also to the public servant, then he will also be punishable up to 7 years of imprisonment or fine or both. So, bribe giver also has to be punished as much as the bribe taker. However, if the person has been forced or he has been coerced to give the bribe for getting that benefit, in that situation what will happen, that if we report this matter within 7 days to the concerned authority like CBI, then he will not be liable for punishment. But if he fails to report the matter to the CBI or the other agencies within 7 days, then he will also be punished equally. Another important thing you should know is that earlier, if during the corruption trial, if the person gives a statement against the person who is demanding bribe, that he has given bribe. Now in that situation what happens, that he will not be prosecuted for the purpose of abatement. But now this provision no more exists. So the result is that suppose you depose before the judge that you have given the bribe, in that situation you will also be liable for punishment. So this will create a fear in the mind of the bribe giver, and he may not like to give a statement that he has given a bribe. So that is an impact of this particular amendment. The next very important change which has been brought in the Prevention of Corruption Act is actions against the commercial organizations. Earlier, the commercial organizations or the big companies, they used to pay bribe to the government officers and no action was taken against the company. Even if the person who was giving the bribe may be punished, but there was no punishment for companies. Now in the amended law, a specific punishment has been given to the commercial organizations also. So a commercial organization shall be guilty of an offence and shall be punishable with fine if any person associated with the commercial organization gives or promise to give any undue advantage to the public servant. So on the companies also you can impose fine under the new provisions. Even though the quantum of fine has not yet been defined, but this fine can be imposed on the companies as the rules will be notified. The next important amendment is that the criminal misconduct has been redefined. Under the original Prevention of Corruption Act, the criminal misconduct by a public servant was including using illegal means to obtain any valuable thing or monetary reward for himself or for any other person, abusing his position as a public servant to obtain a valuable thing or monetary reward for himself or any other person, and obtaining a valuable thing or monetary reward without public interest for any person. So in that situation, this was considered to be Prevention of Corruption Act's definition of criminal misconduct. But now the amended act defines the criminal misconduct as following. It defines misappropriation or conversion for his own use any property entrusted to or under the control of the public servant and amassing assets disproportionate to known source of income. So these two will be now covered under the definition of criminal misconduct. So as we can see that this criminal misconduct definition has been defined afresh, and therefore it has become less stringent now. The next very important change which has been brought by this amendment is that now prior sanction will be required for even starting the investigation. We have to understand that in the original Prevention of Corruption Act, the permission of the government was required only for prosecuting the officer. But now, even to start the investigation, you need permission from the government. Earlier, the director or the special director were empowered to give the permission to start investigation against any senior officer also, but now for any investigation you have to go to the government for starting the investigation. Another important thing is that this protection has been now extended even to the retired or the former officials also. So if they have committed any offense while they were in the office, so after the retirement also, if you want to prosecute, you need the permission of the government. And government has prescribed 3 months of period for giving this permission, but this is not mandatory. This is only advisory in nature. So because of this change, what has happened is that now starting the investigation itself will become a difficult task. The next important change is in respect of the attachment of property. According to the amended Act, it has been provided that Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002 can be used for attachment and administration of the property which has been procured by means of an offense under PCA. It means that if some officer has acquired property because of corruption, then that property can be attached by the government. Another important change which has been brought under this PCA is time frame for trial. Earlier there was no time frame for trial, and the trial used to carry on for several years and even decade. Now according to the amended Act, the 2 years period has been provided to complete the investigation. This period of 2 years can be extended by 6 months at a time and up to a maximum period of 4 years in aggregate, subjected to proper reasons for same being recorded. So at the most it can go up to 4 years, but every time you can extend it only up to 6 months, and you have to record the proper reasons as to why the trial could not be completed within the stipulated time. However, this wording of section is only directory and it is not mandatory, and therefore we don't know whether the judges will be able to complete the investigation within a period of 4 years. So it is not mandatory. This is what we should know. And another very important change which has been brought by this amendment is that the punishment has been increased. Earlier, the minimum imprisonment which was provided under PCA was 6 months. Now it has been increased to 3 years. The maximum imprisonment earlier was 5 years, which has now been increased to 7 years. And in addition to that, we can also impose fine on the person. The punishment for abatement of the offences has also been increased by the same quantum. Now, abatement of offence basically means that if an offence under the Prevention of Corruption Act has been done along with some other officers, for example, if a government officer is using a broker or some intermediary to take the bribe or do some sort of illegal work, then that person will charge for abatement. So for the abatement also, the same amount of punishment is prescribed. Let us now understand the effects of the amendments which has been brought under Prevention of Corruption Act. There are positives and there are negatives. So let us first talk about the positives. The positive side is that now the PCA is made applicable to the commercial organizations. Then the definition of undue advantage has been modified and it will now cover more offences. Then punishment to the bribe giver is to be given, and therefore what will happen that people will think twice before giving bribe to find some benefit from the government officers. Then there is enhanced penalties for the offences which are committed under Prevention of Corruption Act. These are the positives, and let us now talk about the negatives. Under the amended provision, additional hurdles has been created for investigation and prosecution. For example, now you have to take permission even to start the investigation against a serving officers, and you have to also take permission to prosecute even the retired officers, and these are going to delay the actions which is to be taken against the corrupt officers. There is also one very important effect which has been brought under the Prevention of Corruption Act, and that is about the presumption of the culpable mental state or the guilt of the person. Earlier, the guilt of the person was presumed if the offences are committed in respect of accepting an undue advantage, or in case of habitual offender, or for abating the offence. Now, in the amended provisions, the presumption is applicable only for accepting an undue advantage. That means that in the case of habitual offender and in the case of abatement and offence, it will not be presumed, and it will be the responsibility of the prosecution to prove that the person was guilty and he has done it intentionally. So this way, some people who were earlier prosecuted may get relief because of this provision, because the burden of proof has now been shifted to the prosecution if the person has been accused of being a habitual offender or abatement of the offense. So friends, today we have learned about the recent changes which has been brought under the Prevention of Corruption Act. These have wide-ranging ramification on the issue of corruption in our country. Thank you very much for watching this lesson. Friends, today we are going to learn about the Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002. This is a very important law which has been made by the Parliament, and the purpose is to prevent the laundering of money. That is conversion of dirty money which is acquired through the illegal sources to proper money, white money, by using certain techniques. You will find that this PMLA is generally used in case of the corrupt bureaucrats as well as corrupt politicians. And we often hear many stories, many news on this particular act which is enforced by the Enforcement Directorate. So let's know about the Prevention of Money Laundering Act or PMLA today. First of all, about the Act. Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002 is an Act of Parliament of India which is enacted to prevent money laundering and to provide for confiscation of property derived from money laundering. So basically it has two purposes. First, to prevent money laundering, and two, to confiscate the property which has been derived from money laundering. So even though the PMLA Act was passed in the year 2002, but the Act and the rules were notified only in July 2005, and then it became effective. And this Act is enforced by the Enforcement Directorate, which is working under the Department of Revenue, Ministry of Finance, under the Government of India. Before we proceed on the Money Laundering Act, let us understand the concept of black money and the dirty money or the illegal money. First, what is black money? Black money is the money that is acquired by legal means but not declared to the tax department. For example, if you are a doctor and you are seeing every day say 100 patients and getting say 1000 rupees per patient. So at the end of the day, you are getting 1 lakh rupees. Now, instead of declaring the full amount of 1 lakh, you declare, let us say, 20,000 rupees as the income to the tax department. Thereby, you have generated 80,000 rupees per day as the black money. Now, this money is basically a legal money because it is acquired through the legal sources. But if suppose you declare this money to the tax department, you have to pay income tax at the rate of say 30%. That means 24,000 you have to pay income tax on this 80,000 rupees. And so in order to avoid that income tax, what you have done is that you have under declared your income from 1 lakh to 20,000. Now that is basically black money. And this is common in all the businesses which are legal in nature. For example, if you are having a sweet shop, if you are having a retailer's business or any type of business, any type of personal consultancy and all that, you will declare maybe less money than what you are earning, and thereby you will be basically saving taxes. But remember that the money is legal, and that is why it is called black money, because it is hidden from the taxpayers or the tax department's notice. The second type of money can be called a dirty money. Now, dirty money is the money which is acquired illegally, and hence it cannot be declared before the tax authority. For example, if somebody has acquired money by corruption, by drug trafficking, by criminal acts like murder, he cannot declare that money to the tax department or to any other government agency because it is acquired by the illegal means. So this money is called dirty money or illegal money. Now, just like when the clothes are dirty, you put it in the laundry so that it become clean. In the same way, this dirty money is cleaned through certain processes, which is called money laundering. So, let's now go about the proper definition of money laundering. The definition of money laundering is as following: whosoever directly or indirectly attempts to indulge or assist other person or actually involved in any activity connected with proceeds of crime and projecting it as untainted property, he is committing an offense of money laundering. In very simple words, we can say that any action which leads to conversion of illegal money or assets into legitimate funds or assets shall be considered as an offense of money laundering. That basically means that if you have illegal assets, illegal money, and if you are converting that illegal assets or money into a legal assets or money, that process is basically called the money laundering. Now, the money which is acquired in the case of money laundering is actually acquired from the proceeds of crime. That means you have conducted some criminal offenses and the money has been acquired through that, then only it will be covered under PMLA. So, what is proceeds of crime? Any property derived or obtained directly or indirectly by any person as a result of criminal activity relating to a scheduled offense, or value of such property, or where such property is taken or held outside the country than the property equivalent in value held within the country. That basically means that if the property has been acquired, whether directly or indirectly, by a criminal activity which is related to the scheduled offense. What does it mean? Certain offenses has been declared by the Government of India as scheduled offense. And so, if the property has been acquired due to the criminal activity of that scheduled offense, then that property will be considered to be a proceed of crime. And remember that if suppose you use that proceeds of crime and acquire a property outside India, in that situation, the equivalent value of the property which is held in India, even though it may be acquired through legal means, that will be considered to be the proceeds of crime. So that way, suppose somebody has made a lot of money and ultimately invested abroad, and if the government has information, then obviously Government of India cannot confiscate any property which is there outside India. In that situation, what happens that if the person is having a property within India, then equivalent amount of property can be considered to be a proceeds of crime, and therefore we can confiscate that property. So let us see what are the different type of scheduled offense, because only when you are deriving the money from those scheduled offense, then only it will be an offense under Money Laundering Act. Now the scheduled offense are as following. For example, under the IPC there are certain offenses which are provided as scheduled offense, for example murder, criminal conspiracy and all that. Then under the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act, all the activities which are conducted there are basically the criminal activities. Then certain activities of Explosive Substance Act, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, Arms Act, Wildlife Protection Act, Immoral Traffic Prevention Act, Prevention of Corruption Act, Antiquities and Arts Treasures Act. So if the offense has been committed under these acts, which are the scheduled offenses, then only it will be falling under the purview of the Money Laundering Act. For example, if the offenses has been committed under Income Tax Act, Customs Act, GST Act, then it will not be a scheduled offense and therefore it will not fall within the purview of the Money Laundering Act. Now let's know the definition of property. Any property or assets of every description, whether corporeal or incorporeal, movable or immovable, tangible or intangible, and includes deeds or instrument evidencing title to or interest in such property or assets wherever located. That basically means that any type of property or assets are covered under the definition of property. Now let us know the definition of attachment. Attachment means prohibition of transfer, conversion, disposition or movement of property by an appropriate legal order. That basically means that if suppose you have identified certain property. Then if the order of attachment is given by the appropriate government authority, thereafter you cannot transfer that property or convert that property into some other form or dispose the property, or you can move that property. So that basically is the process of attachment. Thereafter, even though you may be having the control of the property, even though the property is not yet acquired by the government, but it is attached and therefore you can't do anything with that property. Let us now understand some of the popular methods to launder money. The first is exports. Here what you do is that you are basically exporting the things at a very high value, much more than what is the legal value. So for example, if you have something to be exported, say 1 crore rupees value of the goods, you have exported it for say 10 crores. As a result, what happens that you have got the foreign exchange of 10 crore and that become your legal money. Now what you have done actually here is that 1 crore rupees of money has been given by the legal way because that was the value of the goods, but remaining 9 crore rupees you have transferred to the person who is actually importing these items through the Hawala transaction. So that person has transferred you that 10 crore rupees of money, and therefore what you have done is that 9 crore rupees of illegal money which you had in cash or whatever form has been converted into white money. The second method is showing loans. What happens that if you have, let us say, illegal money of 1 crore rupees, then what you do is that you ask your relatives or friends to give you loans, and in exchange what you do is that you give that cash money to them, and through them again you get that money by loan. So that is one method of converting that into white money. Then stock market, where you invest into multiple shares, and then whichever shares actually go high, that only you declare, and don't show those shares where you have made a loss, and thereby you can convert that into white money. Agriculture produce is another very popular method. Here what you do is that you have shown some agriculture land, and there you have shown exorbitant profit. So that is another method of converting the black money or the dirty money to proper money. The next is creating bogus companies. Here what you do is that you create many bogus companies and show some profit over there, so that way you convert your black money into white money. And then property market is also one of the very popular methods, where what you do is that you buy the property at a very lower rate. So let us say 1 crore rupees of property you buy at 20 lakh rupees, and remaining 80 lakhs you pay in cash. So that way you have converted that money into white money. So these are some of the popular methods for launder money. Now let us know about the different stages of money laundering. The first step is placement. In this case, what happens that whatever illegal cash we have got through our illegal activity, that basically is disposed of. So how it is disposed of? We invest that criminal money into legal financial system by opening up a bank account in the name of unknown individuals or organizations and depositing the money in that account. And the deposits are made small so that it doesn't raise suspicion. So what happens that you open a large number of accounts through the dummy people, and there you put a small amount of money. So let us say that you open 100 accounts, and in every account you dispose of, let us say you deposit 3 lakh rupees. So that with 3 crore rupees you have put into the system. The second step is layering. It means the movement of funds from institution to institution to hide their origin. And the series of financial operations is done to mislead the potential investigator. So here what happens is that the money which is earlier put into some dummy accounts, they are transferred from one account to another account in a way that there will be multiple loops, and so it will be very difficult to find out from where the money is originating. So that is one method, so that you create a lot of layers, and so the investigator will find it very difficult to know from where the money is coming. The final and third stage is integration. In this step, what happens that you bring back that launder proceed back to the economy in such a way that they re-enter the financial system as normal business funds. For example, the purchase of property, angel investment, and share purchase. So let us say all the people who are where you have put this money, they have done this multiple transaction, and thereafter what you have done is that you floated some share, and these companies, which are basically your own companies, they purchase those shares and put back that money into your account, and that is how the money get converted into white money. So these are some of the methods by which we use to convert the dirty money or the illegal money into the white money or the clean money. Now, what is the objective of the PMLA? It is to prevent and control the money laundering and confiscate and seize any property which has been obtained by the laundered money, and to deal with any other issue which is connected with the money laundering in India. So these are basically the purpose of the PMLA. What are the punishment for money laundering? You see, first thing you have to understand is that PMLA is a criminal law, and laundering of the money is a criminal offense, and therefore any person who is found guilty of money laundering shall be punishment with a rigorous imprisonment, which will be from 3 to 7 years. However, if the person has committed an offense which is relating to NDPS Act, Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act, in that situation the punishment will be 7 to 10 years. And in addition to the imprisonment, there can also be a fine which can be up to 5 lakhs. One of the very interesting feature of this PMLA is that there will be presumption of interconnected transaction. Let's understand what does that mean. Where money laundering involves 2 or more interconnected transactions and 1 or more such transactions is or are proven to be involved in money laundering, then for the purpose of adjudication or confiscation, it shall be presumed that the remaining transactions form part of such interconnected transaction. That means if suppose there are interconnected transactions and some transactions has been proven to be illegal or for the purpose of money laundering. For example, let us say you have supplied some goods on paper, but actually you have not supplied the goods, but you just got the payment. And if suppose we are able to prove that in 1 or 2 cases, in that case you don't have to prove for each and every transaction, because it will be presumed that all other such transactions between these 2 people are basically done for the purpose of money laundering. Another very important feature of PMLA is that in this case the burden of proof is shifted on the accused person. So a person who is accused of having committed the offense of money laundering has to prove that the alleged proceeds of crime are in fact lawful property. That means if the enforcement directorate identify that this is an illegal property which you have acquired through the unlawful activity, in that situation it is your responsibility to prove that this property has been acquired through legal means, and if that condition is not satisfied, if he is not able to prove the court, in that situation what happens, that it will be deemed that he has acquired through the illegal means. So friends, today we have learned about the different provisions of Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002 or PMLA, and we have understood its implication, we have understood about what is money laundering and how people convert their dirty money or illegal money into the white money or the clean money, and what are the consequences of doing so. Thank you very much for watching this.